want to intro you to a term that's more important than you may think. It's eat. Not what we do with the food that we make, but actually what should be done with SEO. EEAT is not widely known in the restaurant industry, and that's a huge miss. Because while most brands are focused on campaigns, promotions, and short-term traffic, Google is evaluating something very different. It's evaluating credibility. EEAT stands for experience, expertise, authoritativeness, and trust. It's not really so much a checklist, but more of a reflection of how real your brand actually is. For single unit restaurants, this kind of happens naturally. There's one operator, one story, one chef, one community. But as a brand scales, something starts to break. Consistency increases, efficiency improves, but authenticity starts to flatten. And that creates a tension. EEAT rewards specificity and local relevance. Multi-unit brands are built on standardization and repeatability. So resolving that tension is the hard work that needs to get done. So at scale, the problem isn't visibility, it's believability. When a brand moves from, let's say, 5 locations to 50, the digital experience often turns into duplication. Location pages start to sound identical. Content becomes templated. Local nuance disappears. And internally, the system becomes harder to manage. Content expands. Oversight shrinks. Inconsistencies creep in and start to do their damage. This is where brands begin to lose trust, not because of one major failure, but because of 1,000 small disconnects. And then the behavior from our consumers drifts as well. And when behavior drifts, perception follows, and that's how brands start to fail. So understand how to fix this. The 4 pillars of EEAT need to be rethought for the scale of a multi-unit restaurant brand, not changed or reinterpreted. First, experience. At a single location, experience is tied to the owner or operator. At scale, experience has to be distributed. So it lives with, let's say, the general managers of that location or the regional managers of that area. It lives with each individual location. This means every unit needs its own story in some way. When did it open? Who runs it today? What makes it relevant to that specific community? This has to be listed out. And for franchise operations, you want to talk about the franchisee and their community. Most brands avoid this. They default to brand level storytelling repeated across every page. But that's where a really big breakdown begins. If every location says the same thing, none of them feel real, and, well, there goes your trust. Experience cannot be templated. It has to be structured and then expressed on the local level. Second is expertise. This is where multi-unit brands have an advantage. A centralized team can produce high-quality, high-authority content at a level single operators just simply cannot. So culinary or food philosophy, ingredient sourcing, menu development, operational standards. This content should live at the brand level. It establishes authority. Then each location connects to it, adding the local context where relevant. Regional culinary leaders can play a key role here. They become named authorities. They provide credibility. They connect the system to the food in a real way. Expertise scales best when it is centralized and then distributed with purpose. So the third one of EEAT is authoritativeness. And multi-unit brands have more opportunities to build authority, but they often fail to capture it. So national press builds brand level authority, yet sometimes it doesn't even end up on the website. It ends up buried or not even there at all. Local press builds location level authority, and both matter. Each location should have visibility into its own relevance within its market. Local features, partnerships, and community involvement should not disappear into a centralized feed. Instead, they should live at the location level, reinforcing that each unit is active and recognized within its own environment. Without that, the brand starts to feel distant and disconnected, and therefore less credible with little authority. The fourth and final part of this is trust. This is the most fragile pillar at scale and the one that breaks the most often. Trust is built through consistency, but not just brand consistency, operational consistency. Being able to display accurate hours, correct addresses, functional listings, responsive review management, and so on. When one location fails here, it does not just stay isolated to that location's SEO. It reflects on the brand as a whole. These are not minor issues. They are signals. And when those signals conflict, trust erodes quietly, but quickly. These are the kinds of breakdowns that compound over time and stall growth without ever being clearly identified. Trust at scale requires systems, not just intention. So when you put all four of these together and you get these pillars aligned, the next challenge is structure, specifically how the website is built. And this is where we at 3L really come in and shine. For most multi-unit brands, the strongest approach is a subdirectory structure. What that means is you would have your brand.com / whatever that location is. So everything lives under one domain name. Every location contributes to the overall authority of the brand. This is where I think a lot of brands go wrong because they put their location pages directly on another website, locations.brand.com. And even though it ends with brand.com, it is seen as a separate website. Therefore, your SEO juice is chopped up and distributed as opposed to fulfilling all one domain name, which is the gold standard, of course. Alternative structures like subdomains, maybe they work in specific cases, but particularly when regions operate independently, which is actually a rare occasion. Fragmented systems such as separate domains for each location, subdomains, they actually dilute authority and create long-term operational challenges. So structure is not a technical decision, it's a strategical. So this is very true for location pages. Most brands treat them as just directories, address, hours, maybe a menu that you can download. You get minimal effort, but you get minimal value. But a high-performing location page should feel specific. It should reflect the actual experience of that location. Local leadership, neighborhood context, community involvement, market-specific details, images of the front side, the facade, the interiors, and the people. The goal is simple. If the city name were removed or the neighborhood were removed, the page should not make sense anywhere else. And that is how specificity is built. And behind all of this, content is content operations, which is something a lot of restaurants fail short to build. And this is where scale either becomes an advantage or a liability. There are two layers that must work together: brand level content, which is owned centrally, and location level content created locally but governed centrally. The system must allow for local expression within clear guardrails. Without that, one of two things happens. Either everything becomes generic or everything becomes inconsistent, and neither of those build trust. So governance is what holds the system together. Franchise systems add another layer of complexity because control becomes distributed. Different operators manage their own listings, profiles, and sometimes content. Without clear standards, the brand fragments. Data becomes inconsistent, and messaging becomes divergent. Trust signals start to weaken. To prevent this, brands need operational clarity, defined standards, central oversight, clear boundaries. All of those things matter. Without that, scale becomes actually a liability. So the principle here is straightforward. Single unit restaurants build depth through focus. Multi-unit brands build depth through systems. Not necessarily more content, not necessarily more pages, although both those things end up being true, but better structure, better alignment, and better execution. The brands that succeed understand this. They do not treat their locations as entries in a directory. They treat them as real places with real people serving real communities. And they build the infrastructure to support that reality at scale. That is how credibility is built. That is how trust compounds. And that is how multi-unit brands move from being visible to being believed. And that's how you get traction in search. And that's how you get traction in AI-generated results, all of it. Create the content that matters most to answer the questions. And I know that's hard to think about when you're a restaurant brand, but that is the key. And it has to be localized and it has to be on the domain brand.com, not a subdomain. When you absolutely ace this, you see the results surge. And that's one of the reasons why we see such great uplift when we launch new digital experiences, because we have the structural SEO in place, we have the plan activated, and then of course, everything is so easy to use. It really just flows from there. I would love to tell you more about that, but more importantly, I'd love to hear your thoughts on the EEAT framework and how you can start thinking about multi-unit restaurant brands adopting it for better search traffic. As always, please do like and subscribe, give us 5 stars, leave a review. All those things really help us keep this going and help rate us higher in all the channels. Until next time, cheers.